A Legacy, the first in a classical series of men's devotionals, depicts characters of men from the Bible who represent men of today. Some succeeded while others failed. There are those who were strong yet some were weak. There is the spiritual and carnal. Kings, rulers, princes, and patriarchs, all of whom men can identify with. They all left a legacy, whether it was positive or negative. What is your legacy? Lessons of coping with an absent father from the life of Ishmael, Abraham's eldest son, is today's devotion. As a child growing up in Abraham's household, Ishmael, the eldest child of Abraham, faced many issues that would later affect his role as a man in history and society. He lived in a home with two feuding wives and mothers. Unfortunately, he was the center of conflict, which resulted in contention. His father worshipped God, while his mother, who was an Egyptian, worshipped idols. His birth was the result of surrogacy, and the woman who instigated his birth, when she finally had her own child, later rejected him in his teens. Lastly, he and his mother became homeless because of all the issues that occurred in the home. Ishmael was approximately 19 years old when his life came to a head in the desert. His father was a man of God and taught him to serve the true God, but now the man whom he trusted and loved abandoned him and his mother. Ishmael lost his father, his home, and his inheritance. He spent his adult life trying to understand how and why a man who professed to love and serve God could reject him like that. There are many men who have gone through similar situations as Ishmael, turning them into angry, bitter, displaced men. Many live most of their lives questioning their fate and passing these traits down to their children. Those that are angry rebel, and are often civil offenders. The bitter ones find it difficult to love and make lifelong commitments. Despite the odds, some will succeed to become responsible men while others fail, allowing their past to beat them into the ground. Though Abraham seemed to have abandoned Ishmael, God did not. Your father might have abandoned you, but God will never abandon you. You might have abandoned your children, but God has adopted them. It is better to be a son of God than to be a son to a father who can easily relinquish his responsibility. You will never be disappointed when God is your father. Unknown to Ishmael, God had promised to bless him. It was God who intervened and saved his life in the desert. Ishmael was old enough to understand that his father had no control over the situation, and if he remained faithful to the God he grew up to know, he too would be blessed. Though he was not the promised seed, God did not exclude him from being blessed. Unfortunately, Ishmael allowed the past to hinder his blessings, as he continued the family feud by passing it on to his descendants, who are still bitter and contending with their brothers today. What Ishmael and men today fail to understand is that God is their true father. Regardless of how good or how bad your father is, God will always be true to you. You might be excluded from the family, but God will never exclude you from his family. You might not get an inheritance from your father, but God is the possessor of your inheritance. Had Ishmael understood this principle, the world would be a more peaceful place today. If your father abandoned you, you don't have to be like Ishmael and pass the animosity down to your children. Allow God to be your father. Call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven. Matthew 23 verse 9.